So, hello everybody. I'm Caro de Riviere from the remote rehab community, and I'm going to be behind the scenes tonight. And tonight's presenters, again, for the fourth week, is Jane Duffy and Rachel Smith from the Calderdale Framework. And we've got Liana Luxton from our lovely remote rehab community. So whilst we're waiting for people to come on, it's always nice to know where you're from. So if you want to find chat, which is at the bottom of the screen, and tell us where you're from. And then if you have questions, which we're hoping that you will have, if you could post those in Q&A as we go along, is fine, but we'll be answering them at the end of the evening. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over and I'm going to come out of here. So thank you, and over to you girls.
Hello guys. I'm delighted to be here for week 4. And for people who don't know us yet, I'm Jane Duffy.
And I'm Rachel Smith.
And we're the co-founders of the Calderdale Frameworkers and co-developers of Balance Active. So this evening, if we want to just get to the next slide, please.
Okay, just share my screen.
Yeah, and on one, please. I think it thinks it's an hour behind. Brilliant. Okie dokie. So we're now on to week 4, and tonight's about looking at some case studies and some stories really, and how Balance Active helps patients to achieve their goals. So the first thing we wanted, if we can have the next slide, please, to discuss before we get into some of the stories, is what's an outcome? Well, the definition is the way things turn out. And one of the things that we've been really passionate about all our careers is making sure that we can promote evidence-based practice. And so obviously it's important that we look at clinical outcomes and things like therapy outcome measures and objective markers. But there's something that's really essential, is that we don't forget it from the patient's perspective. And so how does it feel for a patient, and what is it that they want? And so one of the things that we'd ask you to do, like we've done all through these webinars, is to think about your own practice and think about what sort of outcome measures you use, and do we really use subjective markers enough? And if you think about some of the softer things, the things that really matter, how can we capture those, and how can we start to promote those as being just as important as some of the colder data? So that's something that we'd ask you to consider as we're going along. Now, if we come to the next slide, please. I think we've talked about this lady before, when we were giving you the demonstration of how Balance Active can be used in different settings. So this story now, this case study, is about an 89-year-old lady with dementia. And the staff in the nursing home had noticed that her posture, mobility and her interaction in general were deteriorating. Now, given that we've got the COVID situation whereby therapy interventions are very, very limited, this lady wouldn't have been able to access traditional interventions. And I think one of the saddest things that we listened to was staff telling this lady to sit down and to stay in your chair. And, you know, obviously we all realise that deconditioning is such an issue that is absolutely going against the grain. So these very forward-thinking staff were trained at the beginning of COVID in the use of Balance Active and how to look at people who would just about get potentially referred to for a therapeutic intervention, but actually if they don't, are going to be told to sit down and end up in a right pickle where they can't stand up. So they were trained in the use of Balance Active, and they developed a plan for this lady to put in everyday tasks with some basic exercises as well. Now, what's been fabulous here is that they've now incorporated this activity into her activity program, so it's demedicalized, it's made it fun. So if we go on to the next slide, I think this is the bit that we are very delighted about, is that this lady's really enjoying it. She's been laughing, and it's a while since we've seen this lady laugh, and she wouldn't be able to stand long enough and without having that opportunity just to rest the knees when she needs to, and keep standing. So she's actually building up a standing tolerance. She's less agitated, and they've noticed a change in not just in a physical state but also in a mood. And then it was so lovely, we got a call from one of the nursing staff. The son had asked to pass on well done. He's never managed to get his mum to do any exercises of any kind, and if mum didn't want to do it, she wouldn't. So, you know, in terms of sort of engaging people into something meaningful and purposeful, rather than saying, right, BW, come on, we're off to do your exercises, at which point you might be told to do one. You know, she's doing something she wants to do. She's in the kitchen, she's sorting out the cutlery or doing the napkins, and she's up on her feet, and she's not being told to stay still. So I think we've had some interesting conversations with some colleagues who are going to be trialling Balance Active in an acute trust, and we'll come to that later on this evening, about, well, would you want to use this? When would you want to use this? Wouldn't you want to progress somebody on? Now, for someone like this lady, without it, her option was to be sat down. So actually, in order to promote some safe activity that is going to challenge posture, is going to challenge balance, is going to challenge exercise tolerance, is something that could be used ongoingly. And we don't want people to see that as a stopping. If she gets better still, brilliant, and she doesn't need it, fantastic. But at the moment, that's just doing the trick. So I think it's important. We've had this debate with ourselves all week.
Yeah.
And, you know, you as therapists are going to assess for the usefulness and optimization of this piece of kit against any alternatives. And sometimes the alternative is nothing, which is obviously not great if you're that person who's receiving the big fat zero. So if we can have the next slide, please. Now, you might recognise this lady. This is me. So back at the beginning of lockdown, I had a bimalleolar ankle fracture, so open reduction, internal fixation, and cast non-weight bearing for 8 weeks. And I am a hefty person. So actually, no, fair enough. I struggled with elbow crutches. I really did. So I was non-weight bearing with a frame, and I got absolutely fed up. So I was thinking, what would I do if it was a patient? And I thought, right, I'd try this. And obviously, when we first invented Balance Active, we never envisaged it'd be used for a 54-year-old bimalleolar ankle fracture person. That said, when we were actually analysing what I needed to have and looked at how a perch stool was inadequate because I couldn't reach the sink and I couldn't reach the worktop, it didn't half hurt me back. And it was even more passive. So I was just getting like a pudding, like a deconditioned pudding. I was so weak, really, really, really weak. So actually, when we had a play, and because we've invented it, we could, we had a go on balance. I would have gone Balance Active. You can see that my weight-bearing leg's weight-bearing, and I've just got the tip of my affected leg on the knee block, and it meant I could stand up and use my hands. I could get some washing up done. I could get dinner ready. My frame, I could hop on and off independently, and it just meant that I could start to get engaged in things. And from a mental health point of view, as well as a physical health point of view, it made a massive difference. Absolutely. So I think, again, and I know we've preached on about this all for the 4 weeks, try and think about the problem that you need to solve with your service user as opposed to a diagnosis, because actually this had never been in our frame of reference. But when you think about what I couldn't do and what could enable me to do it, and you'll notice on this one that all the feet are off because it was a very static use of Balance Active.
And it's right up against the
worktop, absolutely. So that's not going anywhere. And I'm literally using that to steady myself. So Balance Active, absolutely, I'm still balancing, but it really, really did the trick for me and built up some tolerance in that in my non-affected leg too. So,
and you did some exercises on it as well.
Oh, I know, but we haven't put them on because it's a back view, and I've got some pride.
No, but it
yeah.
enabled you to do some
No, it did.
exercises and start to get
No, it
sort of
did.
maintain strength in that affected leg.
And that hip
So,
abduction, when we did hip abduction, hip extension and flexion, and it really did, and especially with the pot on, so you've obviously got a little bit of resistance there. It did the
and
trick.
it allowed you to do it without having to use the frame and sort of be bent
No,
forward.
but absolutely up in a well,
good
so I could
position.
exactly, and so my back wasn't hurting. So I suppose, and obviously you'll think, oh, there's bias in that one, but it did work. So we still thought it was a story worth sharing. So
really.
Yeah, it did make a difference.
It did.
Because
that would never have been the sort of case that we would have thought Balance Active would have a use for. So that was quite interesting.
No, it was. It really was, and it made a difference. So the next
slide, please. Yeah. So this lady's not been using Balance Active for very long. So this is a 77-year-old lady, and she has got several long-term conditions that she's been kind of managing reasonably well. So she's got bronchiectasis, so she's got a chronic chest complaint. She's got Sjogren's syndrome, which is an autoimmune disease. So she's got dry eyes and loss of saliva. And she's got fibromyalgia, so she's got a condition that often gives her a lot of pain and stiffness. But she was diagnosed in 2018 with ovarian cancer, and she underwent really very extensive surgery for that, and then bouts of chemotherapy. And what she was then reporting is that she felt really, really tired. She was getting this debilitating fatigue, which was partly related to the cancer and the treatment, and partly related to some of the long-term conditions. And she was reporting feeling really, really stiff, particularly in the morning. And the knock-on effect of all of that for her was that she was starting to feel that she was getting really wobbly, and her legs just didn't feel strong enough for her to sort of go about and doing a normal activity. So she was starting to struggle to get out of a chair, for example, in the morning. She said she was starting to feel difficulty actually going up and downstairs. She felt a bit wobbly when she was in the kitchen and doing kitchen activities. And this is a lady who's really motivated to self-manage. So we introduced her to Balance Active to try and give her a mechanism to include it in a routine where it would help her start to regain some of her leg strength, help her with her fatigue so that she could use it in the kitchen. For example, if she was feeling really fatigued, she could have it there just as something to lean on, but allow her to maintain an active upright stance, use her upper limbs, and help her improve her balance. And so she's not used it for long, probably only 2-3 weeks, but she is feeling that it's giving her some confidence to do some of those exercises. And you can see her there, she's just doing one of the early exercises. So one of the things we started her doing quite early on was standing, so she can use that knee block if she needs to. She's just in normal upright stance, and she's using her upper limb, so she's doing an activity with resistance band there to just get her strengthening her upper back and her shoulders. And she actually does some breathing exercises as she does that. So she'll inhale as she extends her arms out to the side, and then exhale, so she can start to help use her breathing there. So if you go on to the next slide, we've got a nice video of her. So this is her doing some of her slightly more advanced exercises.
No, that's Balance Active though, you're quite right. I'd wobble over.
Oh, bless her.
So she's again in normal steady stance, and we're just getting her to sort of pull that band sort of much more diagonally. But if you could hear her, she actually really feels much more stable and safe with that. And given that she's only using the knee block as and when she needs it, it's just giving her the confidence to do something that she wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah.
But she's managing to strengthen her upper back, her postural muscles, and her glutes and her thigh muscles as she does that. So if you go on to the next slide, you can see a back view of her. So this one's really quite interesting. I'll let the video play and then we can talk about it. Oh, she stopped. So I don't know if you could see there. So we've got her in a slightly different position now. So we've got her into an asymmetrical stand. She's not in tandem stand there. she's in asymmetrical. So we've altered her base of support from a normal upright standing. And again, getting her to use her upper limbs diagonally. But I don't know if you could see, and I don't know if that video will play again. I don't know, Carol, whether you can get it to play again. Yes, you can see her really having to engage her glutes there, as well as her upper back. And you can see there's a certain degree, you know, it is throwing her off, and there is a degree of wobble there, but she's managing to correct that herself. And this is one of the attributes of Balance Active, is it enables that to happen. And she's got that knee block in front if she needs it. But it's really getting her to stand and start to learn to actively control her balance whilst strengthening. So yeah, next slide. I think we might have another. All right, that's so what we've not managed to do with that lady we've just seen is actually get any ongoing objective data at this stage. When we tested her, she struggled to get out of the chair, so she was really having to use her upper limbs. She couldn't stand up from a chair without her upper limbs. She was struggling on the stairs. And when we started to do the 4-step balance test that things like the Otago program use, she could only get into step stand. She couldn't get into tandem stand. She couldn't get into single leg stand. She's got a single leg stand, I think, of about 3 seconds, was it? Or,
not even that.
less
Barely.
than that.
Yeah.
So we need to remeasure that as we go along. But it's interesting that she felt that Balance Active was enabling her to start to take some control back, given all the sort of challenges that she's had. So we might have to report back on that.
Yeah, I think
sometime.
So.
So this case study. So this is a lady that we showed a video of this. I think it was last week, the week before. So this is a lady. She's another 76-year-old lady. She actually had a hemorrhagic stroke a long time ago. So it was several years ago, and underwent rehab at the time. Right-sided weakness. And she'd got to the stage initially with her early rehab where she could walk with a walking aid. It's moving with a stick. I've just said that. I should say mobile with a stick. And she'd got an adapted car. But as she's got older, what she was starting to find is that her right leg, her affected leg, started to feel really stiff. And she started to find it more and more difficult to move that leg and to actually shift her weight onto that leg, which is obviously key to maintaining a good walking pattern. And it was affecting her walking, and she started to feel unsteady indoors and outdoors. Now, prior to that, she had been able to walk outdoors. So it was starting to cause problems. Now, the community physio, when she assessed her, identified, unsurprisingly, that she had got weakness in that leg, in all muscle groups. But she'd got a reduced movement in the hip, primarily due to shortening of her hip flexors at the front, which actually meant for her she couldn't stand upright, and it was therefore restricting her ability to start to shift her weight onto that leg. So they discussed treatment options and had a think and decided that actually Balance Active might help address some of that. So what they did with this lady was to use Balance Active in little short sessions, so she didn't get absolutely exhausted. And she practiced with her standing both symmetrically, feet together, and standing as upright as she could. Now, what the lady found is that because the knee block was there and it held her knee nice and stable, she could stand up really straight and get a very good stretch on her hip. And she felt that was a way of giving her a better stretch than other mechanisms that they'd tried before. She also was able to start to stand asymmetrically with that leg, that affected leg forward and the other one back and the other way around, and stand up really straight and actively try and recruit her glutes to extend the hip and do all sorts of activities on it. So she could use a stretch her upper limb. They did lots of rotations to try and shift her weight. They did activities to try and start to get her to stretch and move both the thoracic and the lumbar spine, and unilateral reaching, so shifting her weight over to that affected side. Now, I think we've got a little clip of her again. So it's a little cut down clip. So you can see her there.
See at the front there. How about the asymmetrical? Can you do that? You know, one leg back, one leg forward.
So she's going to move, I think, a good leg back there. So her affected leg's at the front. It's taking more of the weight, and she's able to really stand up straight. And she's using Balance Active. She's actually using the lateral handles to help her there. but she does need that knee block to stabilise the knee in this instance.
Yes, absolutely. Then she can recruit higher up.
But what she did note, what the physio noted, is that she was actively starting to recruit her glutes.
Yeah.
And one of the things she said quite early on in the activity is that, oh, I can feel something in my hip. Oh, I've not felt that for a long time. And that was actually her glutes kicking in posturally to start to hold her and extend her hip. So next slide. So this is the lady's view. This is her view on how she perceived using that piece of equipment. So she sees it as, it means I can move my hips. So obviously her hips had started to get stiff, particularly that right hip. But this next one's really, this is a proper outcome measure from her point of view. So it's made my walking better. So she exercises on it every day, but she says I can walk outside across the fields. Now that for her means she can get outdoors again when she was starting to become more and more restricted, and that is fantastic. Importantly, she says it enables me to really put weight on my leg, and by my leg she means the affected leg. Once confident to use it on my own, it would play a big part in keeping me active. And so as obviously that was a comment from quite early on, and she does use it on her own. The physio and her have worked out where it is best placed in the home so that she does feel confident, and generally I think they put it behind a sofa, so she's got a big sofa in front as well, so that if she starts to feel anxious using it, she can just touch the sofa as well. And she perceives that she's progressed quicker doing her exercises with Balance Active compared to what she was doing before without it. So that's her take on it. The physio, I don't think we've got the physio's take on it, but the physio actually liked it because it meant she could step away from a patient and actually observe what was going on, rather than having to be right next to her and potentially blocking a knee or having to put hands on to get her to do things. She could actually observe and give different cues and verbal cues, which obviously gives the patient more control over that treatment.
Yeah, and if some of these case studies are on our website in more detail for people, and one of the things that we're just waiting for from the physios here is she's noticed an increase in speed and in stride length, but we need to know what they are. So we'll be adding those changes to the website as soon as we get them. But, you know, like we said before, obviously objective markers feeding into clinical outcomes along with subjective markers. So, but we are absolutely passionate to make sure that we do add to that evidence just as soon as we get some more information, really.
So next slide. So this is another one. So this is someone else who is still undergoing treatment. So this is a man who's in his 30s.
Only young.
So a young man who suffered an aneurysm. So he's having his aneurysm repaired and actually ended up with a big bleed. And so he was really quite severely affected. He'd got global extensor activity, which meant every time he stood up, he almost tipped back. And actually early on, he'd had locked-in syndrome early on. So he was really quite disabled. And what he really wanted to do was to stand and walk again, and he wanted to play with his child. So the only way they could actually work with him to stand was to get him on a high gutter frame, which would enable his weight to come forward. So initially, physio was trying therapy at home using a stand aid, which is, as we from the other sessions, that's one of the pragmatic solutions that therapists often use because it's what's available. But the physio found actually helping him to stand in a really active upright position was difficult on the transfer aid, and felt that his knees got locked back too soon when he was standing up, and his knees ended up being locked back, which obviously played into his extensor movement pattern, and she couldn't get him to stand upright basically effectively unless it was really passive using the equipment. So they decided to try Balance Active. So if you go on to the next slide, he's got some nice quotes, this young man.
Yes, a lot of writing, sorry people.
Sorry, there is a lot of writing. So what they found, once he'd worked out where to put it, and she'd practiced with him, She found it providing with a safe, controlled, dynamic support, and that's really important. So he was actively partaking of the standing and balancing. So he could start to stand and balance and get his weight forward. What she did was use the knee block on Balance Active as a bit of feedback and as a prompt or a cue to help him shift his weight forward. So she'd use it to help him get his knee position right and keep his weight in the right place. Now, what he found is he really liked the fact that he felt safe on it. So he really could put his weight forward and felt safe. He didn't feel he was going to tip or it was going to collapse under him. So it's enabled him to start to retrain his balance and his postural muscles actively, so it can stand without having to compensate and use his arms, and that's really, really important. And when we come on to see what he can do, you'll see why that is important. It's helped him to start to retrain and learn some of the sort of skilled selective control at his hips, knees and ankle, which is equally important in terms of being able to stand and balance, but for him to start to be able to retrain walking. They've used it to practice him being able to control his sit to stand and stand to sit transfers. He's been able to shift his weight around, so using it to help him move his centre of gravity across his base of support without going into a sort of rapid saving reaction. So he's got much more control over his centre of gravity across his base of support. And they've been doing weight transfer practice, so practicing shifting his weight both in normal standing but also in step standing and asymmetrical standing. Now, given where he started from, this is quite a massive improvement in his abilities. So if you go on to the next slide, what he says, or his physio really has seen there's been a massive difference in what she's been able to achieve in those sessions without it. She thinks his walking's better, and it's transferred across into some activities of daily living in standing. So he's now able to stand using Balance Active and do things like open the fridge or make a drink. Now that is amazing, given that he'd been so disabled.
On a gutter frame.
To be upright and using upper limbs normally. Now he says it's easy to put together. He's had his mum helping him put it together, and what he liked is you can actually fold it away. So he liked the fact it was modular and you could take it apart, and when he's not using it, he tucks it under his bed, and obviously he's got help there at home to put it back together. But that was a real plus for him. So rather than having to be up there all the time, tucks away and he uses it as and when. It's helped him do normal things is what he's like. So it's improved his standing, and he's really noticed things like, so when he's doing things like making a drink, he's turning the cooker on, he's dealing with his tablets, he can do it in standing himself, and that's starting to give him a huge amount of independence. When he's got having things like his hair washed, he can stand over the sink. So before that, he'd be going back into extension and losing his balance backwards. Now he can come forward and get his hair washed over the sink. And he's still, so he's obviously not able to walk independently at this stage. He's still undergoing rehab, but he's still got this goal. He wants to be able to walk so that he can then interact and play with his child in a more normal standing way. But he thinks it's improved his confidence on his gutter frame. So there's that element which is really, really important for somebody's rehab. And then the other thing he said, we really like this. So he said it's motivational to stand up. So he likes to stand up, look out of the window, look and see what people are doing around him, have a nosy at the neighbours. That's really important. It's giving him an interest in his surroundings, but he's doing it in standing as opposed to being stuck, sat down in a wheelchair, for example. So some really lovely sort of person-centred outcomes for him.
Absolutely, and there's still more to come. And I think we're incredibly excited about this young man, and we've go on the website again because there's stuff from his mum on there as well, and that's just lovely. You know, she's got hope and seeing a difference, so it's important. So if we can have the next slide, please. Okie dokie. So in terms of what next, I mean, we've given you a snippet, and I think everybody's aware that COVID's proving a challenging time. But even in spite of that, we've got current units on trial in a hospice that we're going to be feeding back on and updating the website all the time. And the therapist who's working in the hospice, again, very, very patient focused, and seeing as this is something that people who would have come to the day hospice before for, this may be something that they can use at home with remote supervision. So that's these people that are not, and again, we get so passionate about this, we don't want to wait till people need to be hoisted or are unable to get out of a chair before they get therapies and get on the feet. You know, it's not too late, but it's later than it needs to be.
Intervene sooner. Absolutely.
And so, you know, this is when this woman's thinking in a different way about how to treat these people remotely from the hospice. The personal trainer that Rachel alluded to a couple of weeks ago has got a couple of patients with long-term conditions, and that's part of their well-being. That's just part of what they do. That's their gym.
So they're doing normal activity,
exactly,
but they think they could do more using balance activity.
And she's got them up with kettlebells in standing, and they wouldn't be able to do, you know, they'd not be able to do that but actually feeling that recruitment and that upright position is fantastic. We mentioned about an acute hospital that we're setting up a trial with, and we're really, really pleased about this, because as Calderdale girls, ladies, or dowagers, or whatever we are now, old crows, yeah, whatever. But as Calderdale, we're obviously we're residents in Calderdale too, so we want our services to be good. But that's where we started off with our other piece of evidence-based work, the Calderdale framework. So to be going back to the acute hospital in Calderdale, and certainly around competencies and delegation, we're incredibly excited to be looking at the community setting there. And we were having conversations right across from early stroke discharge into intermediate care settings, through to reablement, and then to long-term condition management. And the notion that a piece of kit could transfer, and so could a plan, rather than having all the stop-start. And, you know, never mind discharging to assess, continue assessing and treating with all, you know, we know what we mean, don't we? Yeah. Anyway, they were up for it, and so we were absolutely ecstatic about that. And again, going into this idea of empowering carers to be able to do some of this, to be able to do some of it remotely if it needs to be. But obviously, I mean, one question, which was quite funny, and we've got to share, because someone said, well, if they're that good that they can put the frame up at home on their own, do they really need balance active? And we were like, well, actually, I think we need to think about a blended approach, because if they're that good, we would be asking them to come and help us. So, you know, so obviously some patients are going to need to be face-to-face assessed for this to be appropriate. But then that's going to be down to the clinical reasoning, the intelligent triaging systems, to make sure that the right people are seen at the right point by whatever means. So yes, thank you, Calderdale. We're excited about that one. We've already mentioned some of the outcome measures being delayed because of COVID, but that's not going to stop us not getting them. So we will make sure that we do get those stride lengths, we do get the walking speed, we do get the bergs, we do get the time, you know, whatever has been that objective marker, we'll make sure that that's followed up going further down the track. And so, you know, thinking about what we said right at the beginning about the outcome is the way something ends up. We want you to think about how you might work around some of the challenges that you've got, and what sort of objective and subjective markers you might use. And again, we're going to hand over to Caro in a minute, because it may be that when Caro talks to you more about the remote rehab community and how that's hoping to generate this school of thought of innovation and celebration and sharing, that's something we can talk about when we come back to questions a bit later on this evening. So if Caro, if you want to go for it. Are you ready, Mother?
Hang on. I'm quick, you know. I'm quick, but I'm not that quick.
Having a sneaky gin and tonic.
So yeah, no, I hadn't snuck off or anything. I'm just, it takes time to click on everything. Right, hi everybody.
We thought it. Well,
you thought I'd gone off somewhere?
No.
So we have got a couple of questions, I think, but I just wanted to let everybody know the good news. Very exciting. And I'm going to put a link in for you in a second. I'm just going to get it now. And our community link. The good news is that you can now join our community for free. So, hi there. I'm just going to put the link in chat. You'll see I've just popped it in chat. No, I haven't. It's got to go to everybody. So I'm just going to do it again because I only did it to panelists. So yes, so it's very exciting. We are going to be running some paid for courses a little later. We're just sort of gathering things together. The main thing is that you can now join the community for free, and we would love it if you went over and joined us, and you were to come in and have these sort of conversations and have the feedback. And Liana, you might like to say something about it, more to do with the clinical side, and what sort of things are you discussing at the moment?
So yes, we're really excited to offer the community for free. And I think for free, you are getting access to these types of conversations. So the one that we're having them at the minute is around apps and how they work within remote rehabilitation. I think as therapists and listening to different conversations that are happening worldwide, it's sometimes just giving the patient the app is enough in terms of remote rehabilitation, but it's actually having a discussion. Okay, what is it about that app that makes a patient use it? What is it usable for you? Do you even understand the full process of how that app works in terms of a rehab journey? And then having feedback on that. And it's not just in relation to physical apps. You know, the OTs are all over apps, as are the speech therapists. I think physios are kind of trundling behind with all of that. But that's the conversation that we're having at the minute. I think one of the biggest conversations we had was around gratitude. That was a real conversation that lasted a month, where we all did as a community the 21-day gratitude challenge, and then really tried to think about how we could bring that into our rehabilitation with our patients as well. So there's lots of innovative and different conversations that are happening that are different to social media. We're very, very supportive community. And the reason why, from my perspective, I wanted to develop it was because I wanted to have access to talk to people like Rachel and Jane, like all the other therapists that have done webinars for us, because you would never meet them unless you've randomly came into contact with them at a conference. And making connection over social media I find a bit tricky. So we're hoping that you will come and join. And as we get the word out there that we are moving this way, I'm sure there'll be a truckload of therapists coming on board. So yeah, I'll stop talking now. But yeah, that as you can tell, I am
excited. Liana's very excited.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the link is in chat to the community. So just click on that and pop over at the end of the webinar and join. And also I'm going to just put in chat the website for Balance Active. And I know Rachel and Jane, we've spoke of this last couple of webinars that you've done with us, but could you talk a little bit about how people might be able to try Balance Active?
Yeah, sure. If you want to message us through the web, the website, we can arrange for loans and trials of equipment, which we're delighted to say we've already had inquiries for those, and hopefully some of those will be leaving Yorkshire shortly. So just all we need to know is where you are, that you agree to the terms and conditions, and the terms and conditions basically are asking you to feedback. You know, it's obviously in the first, try before you buy, because we're hoping you're going to buy one. But we still want to learn. We want to keep learning and learning and learning. And a bit like, the story of me and my cropped leg. Anything that you use in a novel way, because then there's somebody else who's got that problem with another person. And if you know, it just adds to the body of knowledge and adds to the toolkits really. So if anybody wants to borrow one or trial one, get in touch. We are going to be developing an in-service training video to go with it. Ultimately, that'll be on our website so that people can get it, put it up and have a play with it. Again, this is a new way of working for us. We quite like being face to face. That said, you know, this is the next best thing. And in some cases better. So, you know, we've got to develop our skill sets to be able to do things differently too. So that delivering the in-service training via the website with the product to try is something we're working on it. If anybody wants to come and visit us, if they feel the need to do that, that's also, people are welcome to do that. We're quite open and accessible for people to come and see us and have a play with the equipment or pick our brains, whichever you prefer to do. So pretty much say what you need or want and we'll try and be accommodating. I think that's probably our approach.
And I know Rachel and Jane are going to be on the platform as well, so you'll be able to contact them through that as well.
Yeah, we are. This is true. And just sort of as a totally nothing to do with Balance Active really, but to do with the remote rehab community, the networking through this has been fantastic. So although we are delighted that people are looking to try before they buy, we've also had enquiries from academic points of views, academic perspectives, and we've also had enquiries from other associations that have got similar interests. So it's the Northern Back Care Alliance. So we're going to be doing something with them, a chat with them. So this is such a good way to spread out and we need to do things fast at the moment. I don't know about you. I know we're getting a bit older. It might, but everything feels good. I feel like there's an imperative do you know what I mean? Yeah. It feels as though we've got to get a grip of this and work out how we're going to do it quick. So, you know, there's as many like-minded people that we can get together. Wow. I mean, what's not possible? You know, so I think we've got really excited by being part of it, and we're really grateful that you invited us to be part of your webinars. We've loved it. We've learned loads.
Thank you.
For other members, it's the things you learn are not what you expect, and that's the beauty of it. So good on you, girls.
Thank you very much. And I think just to be really clear, I think we as a community, Remote Rehab, want to be really clear that we don't endorse or promote products in the community. We're a learning community, and I think that this for us is not to take any products and say you must have this product. It's about really exploring what's on the market and what we feel that our members will be interested in. So we don't gain. So if you sell it, we don't have any commission or anything like that. It's it's purely I don't know what the word is. Product. What was it? Chris called it or something. Agnostic or something.
Agnostic, yeah.
That's it. We just whatever that.
Well, that's really important.
We want to be clear on that. And so, just before we go on, you may or may not be on our newsletter list, and so I'm just going to put that in chat as well. If you're not on our newsletter list, do just pop over and sign up for that, because we don't bombard you. You just get one newsletter a week with updated videos on it, so you can click through to them, and sometimes slide decks that are available for you to download. And now I'm going to hand over to Liana for questions. And there is one here about footwear, actually, and what type of footwear you would use, and to be safe, yes, and secure footwear. So could you perhaps talk a little bit about, Liana, maybe talk about footwear a little bit, what you would do?
Yeah, so we had a question that was basically said, would you advise stocking feet or bare feet to having secure footwear with the lady who has bronchiectasis? You said she was struggling to transfer for sit to stand. So I think we had this conversation last week, didn't we, around, I know for myself, I do start with bare feet. I do think it's important not only for foot contact, you know, big toe contact and sensation, but also just for that feedback. So I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, that's it.
Exactly.
Well, the other thing that about this lady's both her fibromyalgia and also the chemo had left her with what she perceived as slightly altered sensation in her feet, and so she preferred being in stocking feet on that balance active, so she could actually get some really good sensation while she was on it. I don't know whether
no, that's fine. And I think, but bare feet she found too uncomfortable. So the stocking feet was somewhere just in between. But I think, like you said, we would start bare feet preferably, exactly for that. And
for
I think
the same reason,
we mentioned about getting the 2-point discrimination. It's almost like Dyson, but with 2-point discrimination all over it. We're dying to get our hands on that. There's a lady over in America that we're having conversations with to see if we can get, because and obviously because you accommodate that, you can use different sharpnesses, if you like. So that's something that we'll be developing going forward. But certainly for that lady, she felt bare feet was too much, but stocking feet gave her enough to know where she could feel her feet, literally find her feet. Is that all right? Does that?
Yeah, no, perfect. The reason I keep muting myself because, and this is off the topic of the webinar, but my husband decided that he wanted to turn on the washing machine. As we have a lot of background
No,
noise.
tell it not to. That's good.
I'm in a real catch-22 here. Okay, I actually have a question. So I know with especially the individuals who've had strokes, some of their balance is lost in the lateral plane, and I know sometimes we can be working where they feel like every time they're going to the side. One point was how you guys retrain that, but also have you ever had the balance active with kind of lateral supports rather than just at the front? Or was that something that you thought of doing or haven't thought of doing or thinking of adding or not, and your reasons for that?
I think in terms of lateral support, it'd be where you'd place it to do the intervention. So if you wanted to do something that against a kitchen top, for instance, or the back of a sofa, if you'd got that.
We did it with lateral support with you, actually. We
did
doing your exercises.
Yeah,
we did.
So it's just about, you can face, you know, it depends the aspects in which you face it in proximity to the touch surface, if you like, can be altered.
It depends on your patient.
If that's what you need.
So if you've got somebody who does feel like they're falling that way, you might want something either to make them feel safer, or you might want it as a cue to come away from to either come towards it and stop when you say your hips touching, or to as you said,
so either to come away from it on to get over to one thing, so as a prompt to go towards or a prompt to come away from. So depending on what the issue was laterally, then that'd depend whether which way round you'd want to set your kit up, really. But
and we've also used it with mirrors, so we've had some, depending on the patient, with the mirror in front, so they can actually see what they're doing and see how far they're shifting.
And because you're not fertling around with the legs, you can actually be getting them to reach as well.
Exactly.
You know, so you can start to get people to engage everything, which has been really successful.
But I think that point is the therapist can actually see what's going on much better than when they're really close in. So it kind of gives them a bit more, a bit more knowledge of what's going on, and enables them to give appropriate cues or whatever.
And I think that'd be, if you've got any patients in mind, that'd be something that we'd be interested in exploring, you know, with yourself, in terms of building up almost like a repertoire. We mentioned right at the beginning of the 4 weeks that if we could build this into some good guidance, you know, so that or best practice indications, not to take people's clinical reasoning away, because we wouldn't want to do that, but to sort of make people think in a slightly different direction, if that makes sense. And so actually, if we'd got presenting problems and then potential solutions, almost like competence.
So that's why we need. That's why we need people to give us some feedback.
Yeah,
on the
absolutely,
really,
because we honestly, with the transferability of it is only limited by our ability to get it out there and exposed to service users. You know, yeah. What can we say? We just want you to have a bash.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's where these communities come into their own, when you have people, and it's not just on your product, but anything they're doing in a rehabilitation, where they can say, I'm trying this, what do you think, or where have you tried this before, or and you can build up that repertoire. Okay, so we've got another question, I think. The person centered outcomes I liked with regards to that client reporting they feel safe using Balance Active, and it's modular, easy to put away, and makes them feel confident in what they're doing. Okay, so it's a comment saying that they liked it.
It is really important that people feel confident, because if they feel confident, then you're going to get more out of them and be able to push them maybe a bit further with the treatment.
And I think when you said about you know, liking something, if this is about enabling people, and the lady who never exercised is laughing using it, you know, she likes doing it, so it's not a torturous thing. Because it's person-centered and it's about what they want to be able to achieve. This is such an enabler, so it's not like the horrid physio's coming or the horrid OT's going to come and I don't want to do it and I'm frightened. Without exception, the first feedback that we got from every single therapist who tried it, the ones who bought the first units from the physio conference at the end of last year, patient confidence is huge.
And therapist confidence, actually.
Absolutely.
Because therapists often feel confident that they know that knee block is going to keep the person stable.
But pushing them further than they would
can do more with them. Yeah.
You know, like you were talking about lateral, getting people really shifting that weight proper on that leg, and it's great. But you know, but I suppose, I mean, and thank you for that. The person-centered outcomes are what we did this for. To make that difference.
It's what therapy's about, isn't it?
It is. AHP's rock.
And I think I'll just there's just another question from me, is whether you guys can give us kind of one example of an exercise that was working on someone's saving reactions that was using the Balance Active, and one example of an exercise that was working on kind of selective control. Because I think those are the two where I was thinking, okay, but how would you do that? And I guess it does sometimes boil down to your patient. But if you can think of a patient where you were doing exercises that worked on those two things, I think those would be real pain points for people.
So the selective control, I know with that lady who was using it to stretch, she was also trying to get her to get more knee control on it. And so she'd sometimes try and get her to kind of let her knee go and towards the knee block and then back. If that makes sense.
So not like a small squat, but you know, just letting go, just be able to let go, but using it as proprioception. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think with the gentleman, the younger man, the 30-year-old, I think she was probably trying to do something similar so he could start to get some of that control of his knee. And some of the saving reactions, I don't think they've done. The best one we've got is when there was that demonstration, one of the videos we did last week or the week before, where there was throwing and catching going on. And she was having to really...
And did actually, you know, use the light touch
handles.
So throwing and catching is a real good example of it. And actually, if you think about throwing and catching and changing the base, so you know, if from taking someone into stride standing or into tandem standing or asymmetrical standing and catching and
but I think not the patients who've tried it so far have not been progressed to that degree yet. So if anybody's got any patients out there. And you want to,
but certainly the selective movement, the selective letting go, It's really
Yeah,
helpful.
you would normally be doing that with as a manual technique. You'd be on your knee, like
Up to the arm and-
you do the same
The
thing.
knee
Yeah.
block kind of almost acts as a cue.
But then as well, when you're not there, they can practice
Yeah,
that
exactly.
potentially with a carer or with
Yeah.
somebody else. So in terms of
Exactly.
thinking about nice guidelines and
Yeah.
minutes per day and whatever,
Yeah.
there's another way to get that to happen.
Yeah,
So
and I'm thinking of patients where I've done it where they've maybe been at the kitchen counter with their knee kind of going into the cupboard, but
Yeah.
that can lend itself to leaning forward on your arm.
Exactly.
because
So it's
And this is about
quite interesting.
absolutely,
position.
it is, because people do that. Then they might get that they've almost they're going to flex the hip to let the knee go. So you're actually not getting selective knee, you're getting hip flexion. That means that they can then let the leg go. So keeping that hip extended is really important, absolutely, so that it is truly selective.
And you can progress that to stepping back and forward. You know how they went into asymmetrical stance, you can progress that selective movement that way. So you're bringing in the hip as well.
Wow.
I have got a question in Q&A. Just quickly, how much is the Balance Active? Can you tell everybody that?
Yeah, sure. It's over to me. I feel like I could work for a double glazing company now. Oh God. So yeah, so Balance Active is £3.95 plus VAT. But if people are wanting lots for an organisation, we can have conversations about that. But we've kept it deliberately. It's about £250 cheaper than the pragmatic approaches that don't provide the optimal positioning that you've just talked about, Leanna. So that's the price currently, £3.95 plus VAT.
£3.95 plus VAT. Thank you. Good. And so I think we're just about at the end. Just before, we've got a couple more minutes. Is there any more questions? If you want to pop them in Q&A for us. Anybody got any questions? Anybody got any questions? Any more before we sign off for the evening? I don't think so. I think we're done. So I just want to say thank you, Jane and Rachel.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Well, so much for the 4 weeks, because it's not just tonight. It's been the whole 4 weeks, hasn't it? And you've put up with us and done a lot of work. You've done a lot of work to make these webinars, I know. And so I really want to say thank you. And thank you, Liana, for coming on tonight. And your washing, I haven't heard your washing machine, so obviously that's okay.
It sounded really loud to me, which is why I had to then say it, because
Oh, and Esther's, there's just a message here. I'd like to say thank you for the last 4 weeks from OT in Penrith, Cumbria.
Oh,
so
and thank you.
Esther.
We've loved it. We've really loved it, and we can't tell you how we've appreciated the opportunity. And we just get in touch with us if anybody's got any more questions after this, obviously through the remote rehab community.
Yes, come on in. Okay, good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.